So, hi everyone, my name's Tim Green. I'm a journalist. I've been writing about mobile for 137 years. Seems like it sometimes.
You don't look a day over one way.
I am working quite closely with the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, which is a global trade body, which is very committed to keeping messaging safe and secure and trustworthy. And in fact, the MEF has a program called the Future of Messaging Program, and they published a code of conduct to encourage collaborative work on keeping it safe. So we're very committed to this area, and we're quite keen to ensure that RCS gets off to a good start in this respect. And in the course of kind of thinking about this this panel discussion, I had a look around to see what was going on out there, and there wasn't too much discussion. So it's a very good time, for us to get started thinking about keeping RCS safe. And so before we start, I just wanted to sort of talk about the fact that the criminals that are active in trying to fish and dupe people, they are extremely professional, extremely serious. And to illustrate this, I will tell you about, just last week I was speaking to the fraud director for Barclays Bank. And we were talking about smishing. Put your hands up, you know what smishing is? Everyone knows? Okay, about half of you. So it's just phishing by SMS rather than email. So you just send a text to someone pretending to be someone else and try and get them to send you their details, private details. So obviously Barclays is a target for this. So Barclays, a lot of people get messages from someone purporting to be Barclays that then tries to get their PIN codes and so on from them. So he makes it his business to reply to everyone that's everyone's reported, to see what he's up against. And so he told me that he rang, there was a number on one, ring this number. So he rang the number of this fraudster, and he got through to a call centre, a genuine call centre, and they answered as Barclays, and they put him on hold. And then he was on hold for quite a long time. So when they got put through, he complained about being on hold for so long, and they put him through to the complaints department, and they dealt very courteously with his complaint and apologised for keeping him on hold. These are fraudsters. So he reckoned that it was either a genuine call centre somewhere in Eastern Europe that was set up just to farm people's numbers from them, or it was a sound effect. But either way, it was very professional. So that's kind of what we're up against here. So that's why it's important with this new messaging channel to kind of get that right. So that's a little intro. So panelists, you've already heard from Rob there. We have Juan Ramirez from Telenor, wave your hand, and Robert Gersman from CLX, and Tony DeRuvo from OpenMarket. So we've already, one of the great hopes we have for RCS is that we're going to get a lot more serious about registering senders. We've already heard this from Rob. So, Rob, can you just tell us a little bit more about this sender registration system? How it's going to let's say for example, I'm committed to. I'm the guy in Russia who set up the call centre that's pretending to be Barclays, and I'm trying to set up. What's going to stop me from doing it in this new RCS world?
I think there are a few things. So one is, if you think about SMS, you get a text message from a number, and it says, hey, fraudulent activity on your Barclays account. And it says Barclays, and it's sort of, there's nothing that helps you in the SMS world to know that that's Barclays, because it's coming from a number. Unless it's in a thread of previous messages that have proven to be Barclays, you don't know. So I think, and I'm probably in a sort of unique position in that my messaging inbox is full of RCS conversations with brands, because anything that comes through, I'm testing and I'm pulling through there. And you start to get used to seeing the logos in the conversation thing, and when you open a conversation, you see the name of the business there, and it looks and feels different. And if when I get things that aren't, you notice that it's not, that it's coming from a shortcut. So I think there's just some basic kind of user sort of awareness. They'll get schooled into sort of seeing things that are verified or not. From a process, so this is a long answer to, when somebody like Barclays comes on to launch an agent, we verify, number one, that Barclays is a real business, and that's sort of obvious because everybody's heard of Barclays, but we get, we just launched a carpet cleaning business, and I'd never heard of them. Like, so is this a real business? And then it's a franchise business, so they have lots of small, sole proprietors, sort of high street things that we have to then establish that list of, whatever it is, 72 different franchises that they say are those businesses really are those businesses, and then we check that they really are those businesses, and that's a laborious process. But the good news is that Google's pretty good at laborious processes, and we do that in other ways. So if all those businesses will be listed on Google Maps, and we actually validate that really is that business premise, and we mail postcards to people, and they have to enter codes into websites, and we do all sorts of fairly kind of complex things to prove that businesses are who they say they are as they're buying advertising or listing on maps or different things. So we leverage those other services to establish not just the Barclays that business, but each of those franchises of the carpet cleaning business actually is a real business.
And to be clear, is Google the only point of this registration? So maybe
I just wanted to add, so that there's multi-layers involved. Unlike SMS, as aggregators, and Robert will attest to this, we also have that same function of verifying who our customers are. So it adds an extra layer. So Google does it, Samsung will do the same thing, and other platform vendors will do the same thing. So in effect, you have 3 layers. You have the aggregator as the first line, and it's in the aggregator's interest to keep the channel clean. There's a lot of fines involved for everybody, so it's not in our best interest to just let any traffic through. Now with RCS, you have a middle layer like Google's and some platform vendors that have that function as well, and then you have the carriers which authorize the campaigns. So there's way more levels than there was with SMS, and I think that's going to significantly reduce the risk of fraud compared to how it was with SMS. Rob made a good point. When you get a message from a short code or a long code, you're not really 100% sure what you're looking at. And we live in a world where Nigerian princes apparently give you money on email, and I think with education over time, people will get used to seeing that logo and that verified check mark on their messages. So I think that significantly reduces the amount of fraud that's possible.
What about you, Juan? What measures are you putting in place?
I think this is an interesting green field for both us and for the expert fraudsters, that there are mostly engineers going to the dark side as well, so they are looking at the new sneaky ways to go, and this is more or less like the antivirus marketplace. You always try to find weaknesses in the scenarios, in the policies, in the infrastructure. So we are talking now lots of verifying the business and verifying the chatbot, so then coming into the layers of going to the aggregators, going to the MNO, then reaching the subscriber eventually. But that's not the only front, at least that's how we see it as well. We have side fronts when we got the P2P level, people talking to people. And that's a very, very interesting channel for us, because we are a group and we are talking between our other opcos, and we were going to talk like Vodafone and Switch. And that channel is sort of agreed to be free. And of course the fraudsters is something that they will obviously not meet. If they cannot attack from that side, they will always exploit that weaknesses. So how does it stop, for example, a fraudster to pretend just to be a friend and send an attachment with an image that says Subway? And first in place, he will try to go for the free route, not to be categorized as that. Who will stop that P2P message? Who's in must pretending to be P2P and it's really A2P? And in that it opens, new plausible scenarios of adding viruses to their phone, adding sort of malware to sort of start opening new things, and when some people mentioning, RCS can enable direct carrier billing. That as a whole as well in terms of fraud is insane, especially in emerging markets. We were at a recent conference here in London that showcased, for example, that Myanmar, which we have business on as well, and Brazil, 80% of the traffic going on DCB was fraudulent. And it's like, wow, we're going to bring that to RCS because we are enabling it, like to click on it, but then it's like, okay, we're also bringing those guys who are exploiting the carrier billing. So we are looking at some parts of it, but the fraudsters will just go everywhere they can get their sneaks in. So it's not something, or of course we can be prepared from day one. It's something that we will learn as the practices develop, as new scenarios come in. That is when we should start to learn. But the problem is, of course, the key thing for us is trust. We want to portray this platform as a trustworthy thing. It's the key differentiator from the OTTs is the key differentiators that the banks will solely trust aggregators and MNOs to use us. And the consumers at the end, they would like to just open and relax, like I'm not being screwed through these channels. And how do you try to roll out this, slowly roll out into the market, but at the same time keeping that trust on a 99.9999% level is of course going to be a bit of a tricky situation, chicken and egg thing, to make sure you're slowly doing it on a safely manner, but still beta tested, no? So that's going to be an interesting challenge how it develops. So we are very keen to work in the community level to share that information, share our knowledge, what are the other guys doing. And this is not just for the MNOs, of course we have our role to enable the subscribers to the aggregators, to the company. And everybody needs to chip in to keep that trust, to keep that level. So of course the principles that we need to work on, they are key. And sharing information is key for us to really succeed on all of this. We have all a stake on it to take part. So MEF is doing a lot of work to try to work together with GSMA to set some standards, some principles, some code of conduct ideas that we need to work with. So
I think
working
probably one of the for all the technical solutions we can put in place, one of the great dangers of RCS is that it's going to be easier to socially engineer people because you've got more material to work with. Robert, I don't know if you've thought about this, the fact that at the moment you've got to dupe people with 160 characters. Now you can dupe them with video and maps and all sorts of things.
Yeah, which goes back to, I think, the registration piece. I think that's so important. And here, I think Google is going to do a great job because of your legacy. However, we need to understand that Google, you will not be the only RCS infrastructure provider, meaning that a lot of carriers who today don't do a lot of probing into what type of messaging goes over their channels will have to pick this up, alternatively other infrastructure providers. So that's going to be a completely new process, which today I would say only exists in America. So in America you have campaign approvals over short codes. That's a fairly strict regime that's run by the carriers and are connected today to handle the short codes. And I would argue for the registered programs, you see little to no spam in America on short codes. On shared short codes, where you then don't really know who's sending, that's where the spam is. So I think we already today, and I've had that situation in America for 10 years or so, that's kind of a showcase of what the ecosystem for RCS might be going forward, if we get the registration right. It needs to be robust. At the same time, it can't be arduous, because then the brands are going to not want to register if it's very, very cumbersome. So it needs to be easy and robust at the same time, and how you do that, that's a different question.
When we get onto the issue of spam, though, there are different regulations and different regimes. So sending spam to people in the US is different from in Sweden. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what rules there are in Sweden and how, if you're going to have a global registry, like how you're going to take account of differences in different regions.
Yeah, I don't think there can be a global rule set, just because the cultural differences are so large between different countries. I mean, that's already the case today. That stuff is allowed in Europe that doesn't go in the Middle East, etc. So, hence rules need to be more granular, probably on national level, in my view.
So, by the way, stick your hand up at any point if you want to get a question, because it's much more interesting to hear from you than from me. Tony, maybe on a more positive note, let's talk about some of the kinds of fraud that affect SMS, which maybe, with a bit of luck, will be eradicated. What about SIM farms and things like that? Is it going to be much more difficult to set up a SIM farm to deal with this kind of fraud, with this kind of messaging, than it is with straight RCS?
Yes, of course. So there's many avenues of fraud. SIM was one of them, but that's going to be over P2P essentially. And to stop that, that's a different conversation. There's always going to be a Nigerian prince sending a message somewhere. And there's tools for that the carriers own in terms of spam. But when it comes to A2P and RCS business messaging, that's going to be significantly reduced. With SIM farms, it just doesn't apply anymore, because unless they can get on an on-ramp via carrier's portal or Google or one of the the middle layers, that's just not going to happen anymore. So we won't have that problem. Like
Can you just explain in case anyone doesn't know what a SIM farm is and why it's
in the SMS world, shops get set up in various countries where they have actual phones with SIM cards that we're going to automate it, and they'll send messages to, they'll have a list of phone numbers that they can just send messages to, and pretend they're Barclays or pretend they're some brand and trying to get some information off of you. So that's a SIM farm. They'll have thousands and thousands of phones in a room, computer controlled, and it'll just send out messages randomly. And the end result is what? You get a message from someone. I still get it in the US. Pharmacy bills, just random loans, right? It's soliciting for loans. And that comes from a regular number, and you just block it using your client. But with business messaging, that paradigm completely shifts. An SMS just can't get on the network, and they'll never be able to get on the network. So I think that gets significantly reduced. It comes back to the end user at the end. If they get fooled into it, that's a different issue. I think that's a social and psychological issue, if you ask me.
Yeah. And P2P based SIM farms, is it going to be possible for me as an individual to send spearfishing attacks or whatever from?
Yeah, once again, you can send an RCS message P2P, which includes maybe some text and some multimedia, but you can't have a verified symbol, you can't have a logo of your company, so you're always going back to a phone number. Hopefully people will get trained into seeing that if it's a phone number and it's claiming to be a brand, that seems a little off. We've experienced that in email all the time, right? It goes to a junk folder.
And then that's, and again, this is a sort of Google answer to the question. Google isn't, but for any of the carriers that we're working with, all of the business to consumer messages that go through, we store for 14 days. We're a data processor. We now have no rights to that data. We can't build profiles and sell ads against it and those things, but we keep that for 14 days purely for spam and fraud detection, and we use the same teams inside Google that do the same thing for Gmail and other services. So those algorithms are good at looking for pharmacy pills and loan offers and those things. So we can spot because it's going through the network, we have the ability to track those things rather than having to rely on consumers to do it.
Right. And also the client. I think the client helps now, as opposed to the SMS messaging client you have on your phone. With RCS, you have the various levels of reporting. So you can call it something spam, you can call it phishing, you can call it too busy. So there's a lot more also on the client side that's been built into the business messaging part of it that helps.
And what about punishment measures for rogue aggregators who decide to, who do let through or register a dodgy business in some way that, maybe it's got a legitimate front, but which will get through the Google system, but is collecting, monies from people.
Right.
What kind of punishment will there be or address for that?
I think first of all, it's important that there's it's obvious, but that there is a legal chain with cascading liabilities, starting from the operator through to the aggregator to the brand, so that if you have misbehavior in that chain, there's actually a chain of liability where a dodgy aggregator ultimately could get cut off, and then depending on which country this happens in, that's down to the legal system. But obviously there would be penalties, most likely, in the operator contract. I think that's how we handle this, where there's specific behavior from aggregators.
All right. So, and speaking, we're both on the aggregator business. It's never in our best interest to pay penalties and fines and get the carriers upset. With shared short codes, this is always a big problem because we have tier 1 aggregators like CLX and ourselves where we're directly interfacing with the carriers and we bear the brunt of the legal and liability. And usually there's a lot of smaller aggregators that tie into us, and that's where the problems usually happen. If there's any fraud that's going on today in our world, it's usually through some of the smaller aggregators that are trying to milk some business. And I think we're relatively good players. The carriers respect the fact that we do stop a lot of business simply because it's not legal. And in the States, it's a lot stricter than in most parts of the world in terms of costs and fines.
Also in that aggregator space, of course, there's going to be a lot of principle educative things that whenever they're going to set up business, they need to do it the right way. If they are well intended, we will not like to cut them off, even because there was a rogue pirate sort of spitting on them, abusing their innocence.
Right.
You know, we could sort of say, you behaving bad, we'll cut you off. Oh, that was good. It was that guy who was sitting behind me. So we also need to be more granular in that way to sort of like, hopefully, you know, work together to cut that. We see detected that pattern, we hold it off because we know that you're well intended. So of course, there's going to be fully bad aggregators, hopefully less and less in this space. But there's a lot of good guys out there who will just happen to get bad guys. So it's all about the platform. Hopefully, will have more robustness in that sense that the policies are harder to have these sort of profiles within.
What do you think might be the impact on the OTT chat apps? Do you think that if we are quite successful at protecting RCS, do you think that fraudsters will just move on to those? Are we already seeing?
They're already doing it.
Yeah. Are we going to see more of that, do you think?
I think, for example, when you see WeChat, that one in Asia, they already been hugely spammed all over. And as a user, it's like, well, I'm not sure what's the reaction as an end user, but this is something key as well for everybody in this business. Is whenever we are deploying a service, we should always try to put ourselves in the shoes of the end user. Would that be sort of nice? I mean, as Liz mentioned, like, I don't want to be bombed, even if it is a good message, like good spam. Not get 30 messages. Do you really want the sandwich? Do you want it? You know, I give you an offer. Because there could be more aggressive sort of targeting policies, and maybe in order to protect just for the sakeness of RCS as a trustworthy, clean platform, we should probably try to together police that to say, you know, stop waiting, keep it easy. Think about it. Don't send in 10 messages. Just send in 1 or 2, and then it's up to him. So that's also another thing we need to ensure that the environment will not end up being saturated.
Right.
And it's probably not defined, so it's something we need to carry on working on. This is safe spam, but just how do we ensure experience is another thing.
So I think, Robert, you're dealing with OTT messages, right? As well as...
A little bit.
Yeah. So given that there's no sort of... I mean, you tell me, is WhatsApp trying to register users in any way, or is there any kind of registration process or sender ID process?
There is
going on?
definitely a registration process.
Is it any good?
It's decent. You know, it's early days for them as well, right?
It's early, so
it's I wouldn't say this is a full production process that they have put in place yet. But you know, they're definitely trying to register the brands who want to sell.
And we've heard a couple of mentions of this, you know, people searching, you know, with people, person to application, searching for brands. Could that search process be abused by criminals? Maybe Rob, you can pick that one up.
You know, I think, you know, we haven't really covered this today, but I think the whole P2A use case is really interesting. Like, I think you know, we're dealing with A2P today, you know, so the business has the phone number of the opt-in and sends a message to the consumer. If you look at sort of customer care use cases, which really don't exist in any great sort of volume with SMS, then, you know, phone sensors, etc. So I think, you know, as Google, certainly we're looking at that. Like, we have some fairly interesting discoverability sort of points through search, through maps, through Google Play. Like, you know, there are different places that people go and look for businesses and might want to engage in a messaging conversation. So I think, you know, for sure you should expect us to start opening some of those messaging channels from those places. I certainly haven't spent any time thinking about how you could fraud. I mean, you can't do that on a Google property. You could potentially put a messaging button on a website and say, message us. That was fraudulent, but again, that would have to be a decoy Barclays website or something. Potentially, you could look through from an email. I mean, so you could build sort of layers of those things, but I don't think there's any evidence of that happening today.
So right now in the specification, the directory, again, it applies, the paradigm is the same. You have to be a registered bot or a registered agent. And so you go through that strict process and then you get listed on the directory. So if you're looking for 1-800-Flowers, you'll find it, or our customer 1-800-Contacts. You'll find it in the search, but you have to have that on-ramp process. So I think it's the same thing. It's a smaller subset of search that you can do.
Because it's always back to the registration process. Yeah. That's the key.
Mm. What about, whenever he talks about grey routes, is there a grey route dimension to the RCS story? And could people registering businesses in unregulated part of the world, somehow smuggle their.
Right.
I think it's important that the MNOs keep control on what type of traffic go into their network, because otherwise the grey route challenge could come on RCS like it did, 20 years back on SMS. So I think that's the key. The carriers need to ultimately approve or have someone trusted approve what goes into their network.
Yeah, I can certainly attest to that. We are very, very keen on taking that action, on ensuring that the grey routes seen and SMS will not move over to the A2P flow.
Right.
So that's why we have the different layers that A2P we want to standardize as much as possible. How do they access our subscribers from a brand? It will come with this layer. And then, of course, P2P RCS messages, we will talk to the other hubs to exchange that traffic, but we will always secure like it's P2P only, so we can at least avoid that. And of course, fraudsters will still try, and we will work together to kill those ones. So the grey routes will still be attempted, but at least we know that A2P should always come, north to south, or at least that's the principle we have in this mind. I sort of heard in the US, because the US is sort of working together as well, they are maybe exploring different sort of scenarios, I'm not sure, where they want to exchange with the different A2P layers on that same P2P level, sort of for free, like meaning like let's say somebody from T-Mobile, a brand connected by the map of T-Mobile will want to reach a subscriber from Verizon. They will just exchange it on a sort of the P2P channel rather than letting the company having to go to Verizon to then follow that flow. And it simplifies, but of course it opens from a fraud perspective another thing they need to look at. So it will be interesting how that develops on that market. But from what we're looking at on our side, it's more A2P is one thing, P2P is one thing, and we will polish it in respective ways. So.
Okay, so
What's your position on that one? Is how messages should flow?
I'm probably, I can get out my technical depth pretty easy here, but we have a sort of hub model, so we provide sort of hubs, so we have North American hubs, European hubs, sort of cloud hosted, and then the carriers connect to those things. So the sort of carrier interconnectivity comes through that hub, which again allows us to do that sort of spam sort of fraud detection on that basis. But clearly,
but on the
that's one solution in the market. So
But that hub is for us to talk P2P level in any case. The A2P is coming from the RDM. So.
Correct. Yeah.
So the hub that is mentioned is purely P2P level.
So you don't see, Google isn't pushing for A2P messages to go over what's essentially a P2P hub?
It goes through the same hub, yes.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we've got a question at the back there.
So talking of grey routes, is there going to be something like the working seat between one map and the other map? Or one network and the other network?
Well, given that there's no fees right now in terms of, carriers haven't decided on fees in general.
We have a carrier there.
Yeah, as he says, we haven't really decided on that. This is still something that, from a simplicity perspective, it looks better if we sort out ourselves how we handle the A2P market and they sort out themselves. And at some point we need to have some sort of interconnect sort of agreement. We are already connected on P2P level, but we haven't got that far yet for A2P. For P2P we have this free exchange model.
But the only reason it monetized on SMS was because A2P was coming in over the interconnects.
Right.
If you keep the interconnects clean from A2P, there's no point in connecting, because P2P traffic flows are generally balanced. So it's really down to this discussion if you police that.
So certainly we need to have some sort of a policeman agreement really, but still on the works.
I don't know, maybe a different way to look at this is consider RCS two different products. There's the P2P product, which behaves in one way, and there's the A2P product, which behaves in another way. And I think that's a healthier way to look at it, especially when it comes to fraud. So P2P has its own challenges. But A2P is, we call it RCS, but it's a different product. Completely different features, different mechanisms involved. So maybe as an industry, we should start to look at naming it a little bit differently. We all say A2P, and most people outside this room have no idea what that means. But That's why interconnect kind of goes away, because now you're connecting directly. You're not sharing traffic when it comes to A2P RCS.
But that names are already sort of defined within GSMA. Like we, you know, it used to be called A2P layer, the map, the messaging as a platform. Now is RCS business messaging, acronym RBM. So I normally use in map RBM sort of preferring A2P and RCS as P2P. So, but of course here is a bit of a mix. But it's a good idea. We need to be more clear.
We need a new
rules are
acronym.
different.
Yeah. The question here.
Yeah. We're talking about verified senders and there being links in the chains from the brand through to the MNO. Do you think that RCS will remove tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 aggregators?
No. I don't think it has to.
So you'll be responsible for making sure that the people that aggregate through you are validated?
Yeah, ultimately, yes.
That's already happening in America. And has been
In
for
America.
a decade.
Yeah.
Some of the examples I showed today, there's more than one aggregator. Or partner, they're not necessarily an aggregator, but there's a chain of people between the Google API and the brand.
Yeah.
And the carriers prefer it that way too, in the context of being able to move it out to the aggregators who are the experts in this. So,
Yeah, that'll continue.
You mean us being experts?
Yeah.
And I think one of the interesting things that I see happening there, which maybe is sort of, I don't know if it's a threat to the people in this room, but like some of the people owning those relationships aren't SMS aggregators. So, you know, LivePerson, who's a customer service platform, they run call centers, built the Citibank platform. You know, and probably Citibank's got an SMS aggregator, but they chose to use LivePerson for different reasons. Like as you move into a conversational experience, maybe that's people that's building your Facebook Messenger bot, not your SMS aggregator. So you know, there's an interesting ecosystem of what we think of as partners building those experiences, and it's not always coming from an SMS world or from a mobile messaging world.
Sure.
Okay, everyone. Well, I think we're out of time, and it's a fascinating subject and a very important one. So thank you very much to Rob, Juan, Robert, Tony, and thank you for listening and making it to the end.